Hola amigos, this is Cristina Luna in Café with Cristina, here with Dr. Anthony Stevens-Arroyo. He's a theologist, and we want to know everything about this new Pope, the first Pope from North America, but also his Latin America, right? And what do you think will be his projection during his
pontificate? It is very remarkable that for the first time you have a Pope who comes from North America, from the United States. And what's interesting to us is the fact that he also, by choice, is a Latin American from Peru because of his work there. So here you have a Pope who represents North America by birth and South America by choice. So he really is an American Pope in the fullest sense of the word, a continental Pope. But he's also intercontinental. And here's why it's remarkable that an American was never chosen before, but is chosen now. In order to get elected as Pope, you obviously have to get the votes of other cardinals. And historically, most of the cardinals have been from Europe, and most especially from Italy. And that's because of the history of how Catholicism and Christianity developed over the years. Additionally, about 25% of all of the cardinals are either from Italy and serving there, or they are members of the Vatican as part of the governance of the Catholic Church. So you have to have exposure, using the word politically, so that other cardinals from around the world know who you are. And this is what Cardinal Robert Prevost had as an advantage, that he was stationed and positioned by Pope Francis, very intentionally, to be in charge of naming all the bishops of the world for 2 years before the time of the Conclave. So he had this opportunity that others could see him. For your readers and your listeners, I would say it's comparable to U.S. politics, so that you could have a governor of, let's say, Idaho, but that would not give that politician the exposure nationally. Whereas if they're a senator, they have much more opportunity to shine before the public and get votes. And so in a different sort of sense, this is why in the conclave, Robert Prevost from North America, from the United States, from South America, from Peru, but also located in the Vatican, was able to get a 2/3 majority of the cardinals to vote for him as Pope.
In a very short election, right? Because sometimes it goes on for many days. Well, and it was kind of quite clear, right?
The rules have been streamlined, and Pope Francis very much wanted to have continue in his strain. So he had appointed something like 87 of 135 cardinals voting had directly been nominated and chosen by Pope Francis to continue his work and his style. This really is the key to understanding the reason the election was so short, because the church and the cardinals wanted the work of Pope Francis to go ahead. Historically, Christina, I think you could say that there are 3 different kinds of popes. Now they do the same things, the same job, but they do it with their own characteristic style. And they fall into kind of categories. So the first one is the Pope as teacher, a person that appeals to understanding, to theology, something that I studied at Fordham University for many years. Then there is the Pope who is, for want of a better word, a policeman, who sets the rules, who punishes the people that break the rules and rewards the people that do things
I don't think that's him. He doesn't look like any of those two, right?
And the third kind is the Pope as your grandpop, who is able to listen to what you do, listen and share with you and say things like, oh, you're doing a good job, keep it up, or I think you could do better. So his correction is out of love and compassion. And that's certainly the way that Pope Francis was. So with those 3 things that have to be done in different styles, my question is, what do we expect from Pope Leo XIV?
Yeah, what can we highlight, do you think, looking into the future of what he will do?
Well, I think he chose the name Leo because he wants to appeal as a teacher to the understanding of the church.
What has that to do with Leo? Can you explain it to us?
Well, the Leo XIII, who is the immediate model for Leo XIV, was the Pope who began writing encyclicals. Before him, the idea of the policeman. Popes wrote decrees that you had to do this. This is the famous bulla papal, the papal bull, which has nothing to do with an animal, by the way, but it is a decree that people have to do, somewhat like an executive order from a president that has no other support than the word of the man in charge. But the encyclical was an effort by Leo XIII to speak to the world. And so, using Catholic theology and philosophy, Leo XIII began writing encyclicals to the whole world, explaining this is the way Catholics look at it. We understand what is going on. We look for our opportunity to cooperate with others in the world. And so the most famous encyclical of Leo XIII was on social justice. It was called Rerum Novarum, a new things. It said the world has changed from the Middle Ages. We live in a new age, and the church and the world have to learn to accommodate themselves to this change. So if he has to name Leo XIV, I think he's going to do the same thing.
What do you think he's going to do different or additional from what Pope Francis did?
I think he's going to continue the work of Pope Francis, but I think he's going to use much more philosophy and intellect and use the mechanisms of the church through universities and what's called synodality, where local people cooperate in addressing the problems that they find before them. And there are 3 or 4 areas I think that are of high priority. The first one is peace. We live in a world that's fragmented with dictatorships, with wars, and I think that Pope Leo XIV is going to appeal to that idea of rationality, much as you see in something like the United Nations, but the United Nations is political. So I think he will call moral ground for peace, especially in Palestine and the wars in the Middle East.
What do you think will be his relationship with the politicians or the governors or the powers in the world?
Well, I think we've already seen it. He criticized Vice President for trespassing into the area of theology. And I think he's going to take a very strong stance, as did Pope Francis, about deportation and the forcing of rules about immigration that are going against human rights. I think that is going to be a very important declaration and an issue that he will face head on. Environment is very key to Pope Leo XIV. It's something that was addressed by Pope Francis in his Laudato Si, which was an encyclical. But I think that with Pope Leo XIV, he's going to deepen that and ask Catholics and people of goodwill all over the world to be more concerned about preserving Mother Earth. Because if the Earth dies, we all die. So
that's for sure.
Yeah, so that the focus, for instance, on abortion, about we must preserve life that way. Pope Francis actually wrote, before you get to abortion, you have to save the world. Because if children are born into a world that is falling apart, where everything is contaminated water, contaminated air, then those children will not have life. So the priority of environment, and it's something I believe where religious people can make a great contribution. The last one is women.
Yes,
I knew you wanted to get to women.
You took it out from my
right.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting that Pope Leo XIV, as cardinal, was in charge of the nomination of bishops and the processing of those nominations. So there's a very clear process of making sure that the people who are going to rise to power in the church have to have excellent character, and they examine every aspect of their background. So that's been going on for an awfully long time. But this new pope, when he was the cardinal in charge, named women to be on the committee that reviews whether or not a priest is qualified to be a bishop. And his argument was, his reasoning was, well, women are the majority of the Catholics in the world, so they should have a choice, a word to say about who's going to be in charge of the church. So it's a small thing.
And what do you think made him get chosen?
I was saying that it was a small thing to add 2 women to a big committee. But it's that sort of change that actually is radical. If you think about it, you're planting seeds that are going to grow into change. And I think that the other cardinals saw in this Cardinal Prevost, Leo XIV, who could make small little changes, but that would have tremendous impact as history unfolds. And so I think that's going to be his style throughout his pontificate of moving the pieces on the chessboard in such a way that as things develop, it moves in a very positive, futuristic way.
You know, I was there when he came out, to the first time in St. Peter, right?
Yes, yeah.
And the first thing I thought is, tiene cara de buena persona. He has the face of a good person.
Yes,
Do you know something about him personally that you can share with us?
I don't know anything except that he's a Chicago White Sox fan, which means that he's used to suffering because the Chicago White Sox have had a terrible record in terms of world championships. But I also know that he went to Villanova, where my 2 brothers went to college, and that he's a fan of basketball and what is called Wildcat basketball, Villanova Nation, which is very interesting because Pope Francis and before him, Pope Benedict were great fans of soccer, what they call football in Europe. And that, of course, is a universal game. But basketball is catching up.
Thank you. So he's a fan of sports, so that's good.
Yes.
And now changing the subject a little bit. We all know about this movie Conclave, right?
Yes.
How much is there truth in the movie, like into the real way that, or the politics or the world or the Vatican, where the popes are elected?
Well, the word conclave means conclave. So it means that they're locked in with the key around it. So we really don't know what goes on inside. However, the Vatican has been very open with the author and letting him see the places where things happened. And the customs, as for instance, taking the votes and putting them on a string and puncturing them so that people can see that they have been counted, but only those have been counted. That is something that is a procedure borrowed from the medieval times of things that were done in other contexts where there were elections. As a matter of fact, it's those ballots which are burned. And the idea was that they would make sure it would be black smoke when they were burned. There was no result, no 2/3 majority, and white smoke when, of course, they did. The picture, I think, it's a novel. It's not true. The kinds of things
or
are
some
there.
things are true.
But what's true about it is that they took the foibles, the humanness of each of the cardinals, the kind of the sins that are present, not just to cardinals, to all human beings. So there was greed, there was pride, there was sexuality, and all of these things bubble to the surface, and they are disqualifying for the different candidates. But somehow the group realizes that they're not there
Don't be a spoiler.
human.
Don't be a spoiler.
No, I won't be a spoiler. But they realize that there's a greater good beyond their own immediate goals. And there's a very telling moment when one cardinal, played by Stanley Tucci, says, "It's hard to believe I'm as old as I am and I still don't know who I am." So it has that touch of humanity and showing how humanity and spirituality collide and produce, as the picture will show you, a pope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony Stevens-Arroyo. And we will see the journey of this new pope, and as you said, how little steps can make a huge impact. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. Please follow us, and if you haven't watched the movie, watch it. Conclave. Thank you, amigos.